This list is it's a top 10 list of movies that I would recommend to anyone. Whether you're a movie buff or not really a movie buff, if you enjoy movies or you don't really watch movies, I would recommend these movies to pretty much anyone. This is a list of movies that I think are overlooked by general audiences, although I'm sure movie buffs and people who are really interested in film have probably heard of or seen. So I apologize, but this is basically a list for anyone. Now keep in mind, this list is in no particular order, except the first one. The first one I think is the best out of all of them. All the other ones are really good, but the first one I think is the best. Number 10 is The Lives of Others, directed by Florin Henkel von Donnersmarck. Try saying that 10 times fast. I think this is a really intriguing thriller about East Germany. Number 9 is Thank You for Smoking, 2005, directed by Jason Reitman. It's a very funny film. It's also a political film, and it's actually a film that I think is somewhat naive about politics. I won't get into why. That's a whole nother video. Aaron Eckhart is great as Nick Naylor, and it's directed by Jason Reitman, who also directed Juno. Number 8 is It's a Disaster, 2012, directed by Todd Berger, and it was also written by Todd Berger. It's a really funny end-of-the-world comedy that all takes place in one house. It stars David Cross and Julia Stiles. Number 7 is In Bruges, 2008, directed by Martin McDonagh. Martin McDonagh also directed Three Billboards, which, to be honest, I didn't really like that much because I just felt it was a really condescending film. But In Bruges, I think, is really funny. Number 6 is Michael Clayton, 2007, written and directed by Tony Gilroy. This is a really well-crafted and intelligent thriller. It's mainly about corporate lawyers, and it stars George Clooney, Tilda Swinton, and Tom Wilkinson. And Tom Wilkinson gives one of his best performances. Tilda Swinton actually won an Academy Award for this film, but she was good, but I think Tom Wilkinson should have won an Academy Award for this film. Tom is playing a character who's a lawyer, a really successful lawyer, and he has a nervous breakdown. Anybody who's seen Tom Wilkinson knows he's a good actor, but this is one of the best performances he's ever done. Number 5 is Out of Sight, 1998, directed by Steven Soderbergh. This is one of Soderbergh's best films. This is a movie that really kind of reminded people just how talented he is. It's a heist movie. It's a jailbreak movie. It's a romantic movie. It is a little bit of a rom-com. Now, frankly, Jennifer Lopez is really talented, but let's face it, she's been in a lot of bad movies. This is the best movie she's ever been in. And this was written by Scott Frank. Scott Frank also co-wrote Minority Report, and he also did some rewriting on Saving Private Ryan, although he did not get any credit. Number 4 is The Way, Way Back, 2013, directed by Nat Faxon and Jim Rash, the same guys who wrote the Alexander Payne film, The Descendants. This is a film that I think really just captures the details about childhood and adulthood very, very well. Toni Collette is great, Steve Carell is great, Anna Sophia Robb is great. It's a movie that really captures how frustrating and how depressing it can be to be a teenager, especially if you have a really bad parent. Number 3 is After Hours, 1985, directed by the Martin Scorsese. Even if you're not a fan of Martin Scorsese, I would still recommend this film. This is actually one of his rare comedies that is really funny, and it's a little dark, and you will definitely notice some character actors from the 80s, like Balki from Perfect Strangers. The two parents from Home Alone are in this film. Number 2 is Matchstick Men, and this is another comedy directed by Ridley Scott. And Ridley Scott doesn't really do comedies that often, but when he does, I think he does them pretty well. There's an interesting visual style to this film, but it doesn't really get in the way of the comedy. I don't think I'll give away too much here, but I'll just point out there is a surprise ending to this film, so keep that in mind. And the number 1 movie, and again, let me say that out of all the films, I think number 1 is the best. It's called The Lookout. It came out in 2007, and it's written and directed by Scott Frank, who, as I mentioned earlier, also wrote Out of Sight and Get Shorty. The Lookout stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Jeff Daniels, and it's basically about a guy who's a hockey player in high school. He's sort of the star of his school. He gets into a car accident that he feels responsible for, and he is obviously very depressed, and he gets involved in a bank heist. What I love about this film is that it's a very well-written thriller, it's very well-directed, and it's also actually a really good character study. I should also point out Michael Mann and Sam Mendes were thinking about directing the film, But David Fincher apparently spent a lot of time with the writer, and he contributed a lot of ideas to the script, which ended up in the film. I think it's not only overlooked, it's criminally overlooked. If you're interested in screenwriting, Scott Frank wrote, I thought, a really clever version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. His version was actually very interesting. And just a quick note, I averaged out all the Rotten Tomato scores for all 10 films. The average score for all 10 films is 86.7%. So that's my list. Again, I recommend these movies to anybody. If you're a hardcore movie buff, or if you're not really interested in film, or if you're not that into film, but you do enjoy a good movie every now and then, I would recommend these movies to anyone. I would say, let me know what you think, but I don't really care, unless you have something nice to say.